Hi guys, welcome to Twin Perspective. I'm Joe, and tonight I'm going to be breaking down episode 9 and episode 10 of Maniac, a limited series on Netflix. The final two episodes, full spoilers, and I love this show. This show is great to me, and episode 9 is probably my favorite one. It's called Utengata. So here we go. We bleed over into another reflection. This one's absurd. It's very action-packed, kind of like a John Wick at first. It kind of looks like a Doctor Strangelove setting. We start with Admiral Grimson. Now, this is the first time that Grimson's actually appearing as a character in one of these reflections where everyone else sees him too, and he's actually part of the story. This is really, really weird. It's the only time it happens, the final one. He's an admiral, and he's talking to Jonah Hill. Jonah Hill's not Owen. Jonah Hill is Snorri. He's from either Northern Europe or something, and he's got this outrageous accent. And Grimson is telling Snorri that he has to testify in front of NATO. And he's telling Snorri, quit saying you're guilty. You're not guilty. It was an accident. And Snorri says, but I killed him. He says, yeah, you got to quit saying you're guilty. It was an accident. You quit being a ninny. So then he tells him that the next 2 hours is going to determine not only his fate, Snorri's fate, but also the fate of the entire world. So we go to he's testifying in front of NATO in Belgium. And he says, Snorri says, I'm guilty. I'm guilty, I did it. He killed little Ernie. Okay, so we get this whole thing where he reads a statement. It's really small. And he says he wants to be placed in the cone of a rocket so that he may be shot up into space so that Ernie's folk could do what they need to do with him. And he says he wants to admit his guilt, and he wants little Ernie's parents to know. So they record him, and he starts to describe himself in detail, and they just need the pertinent evidence, the pertinent facts about his encounter with Ernie. But he describes how his father is Dutch and Italian and Icelandic, and his mother is Australian and Finnish and Swede, and that accounts for his unique accent. Just the information pertinent to Ernie. So Snorri says, I was on a birding expedition, a birding expedition, and he found little Ernie, and he thought he was a little person. He was 2 feet tall, bluish complexion with golden highlights. He was just beautiful. And he took little Ernie in to nurse him and to take care of him. He tit fed him until he was strong. And little Ernie told him secrets about the stars. And little Ernie said that his people were here to rid the Earthlings of all of their problems. And so little Ernie was going to provide a statement to the world, to let the world know of his existence. But the night before, they were celebrating. And they're dancing, and apparently Admiral Grimson's a very good dancer. And there's a crowd of people there dancing in this room, and I noticed the 2 little twins that keep popping up, the ones that were with Gertie in the 40s vision, and they were also with Queen Nora in the Lord of the Rings vision. Well, they're here dancing in this party. And poor Snorri, he takes his gimlet and he puts it on an amplifier that's hooked up to a mic, and he adjusts the mic real short so that little Ernie could give his speech. He was going to address the crowd before addressing the world the next day. And Snorri bumps into the amplifier and the gimlet spills, and it spills on the amplifier and nobody notices, and then little Ernie shows up to give his speech and everyone's clapping. And then this little alien hand grabs the mic and just blows up. Blue stuff goes all over the whole crowd. And poor Snorri's devastated. Oh, I electrocuted him. It's a great testimony. Then everything starts to shake at NATO. And they say there's this large mass that's just past the moon. And this huge heat ray is now focused on the Earth. It looks like, and I think it's Admiral Grimson. No, it's this guy named Banner, and I can't put my finger on where I've seen him if he's popped up before. But the name Banner has popped up several times. But it's this guy Banner, and he tells NATO, well, it looks like we're fucked. Now, while Snorri is giving his testimony, he notices Annie in the audience. Annie is now, I think, Ruth, and she's wearing this red suit, and she's smoking a cigarette at first, but eventually she starts smoking out of a pipe. And when everything shakes, everyone notices it. So they're like, well, you know, this is the end of the world. Take Snorri away, and they're going to do whatever they have to do. And so they've got poor Snorri handcuffed to a chair in a room. Now we go into reality, where Dr. Greta Mano Ray has just come out of her therapy session with Gertie, the computer. And Greta says, and I wrote it down, your computer is suffering from pathological bereavement. She's cycling through delusional emotions. And one minute she thinks she's God. The next minute she thinks she's a subject in your trial. And then the next minute she's weeping over being so lonely all the time. And Dr. Greta says, I think she's lost her mind. Well, Dr. Azumi and Dr. James, her son, start to explain how it looks like the computer's functioning fine and that the subjects are probably fine. And Greta's a little put off because they called her there to evaluate this situation, and now she's telling them they need to shut the program down, and they're not listening to her. So first, Greta starts to analyze Dr. Azumi Fujita and says, you know, this is the computer's your baby. This is your offspring, so quit covering for her. You just want this experiment to work so that you can take the pills. And at that point, Dr. Vegeta gets pissed and says, Dr. Greta's jealous. She's jealous of the computer because this trial is going to help more people than her nickel and dime theories ever have helped. She's jealous of her son because her son came up with the program, and Azumi says, and you're jealous of me because I have your son. And Dr. Vegeta slaps this big kiss on James Mano Ray. And then Azumi walks out the room, and Dr. James starts talking to his mother, and he starts to get a little analytical too and says, you were a horrible mother. You told me things you shouldn't have told me. You slept in my bed way too long. And as he's confronting his mother and telling her off, he goes blind. He says, I'm blind. I can't see. And Dr. Greta says, you know, it's psychosomatic. I don't believe in psychosomatic conditions. Azumi! He starts crying. He's got his body up against the glass, and everyone in the commons room can see him freaking out. And the orderly notices the monitor in the commons room, and it usually plays this lovely theme when it's time for them to do something. And it plays the lovely theme, except this time it's distorted. And the monitor says it's dead time, and it shows the subject laying in bed and then an explosion. The orderly sees this and sees the doctor freaking out. And he says, it took that man 2 whole days to blow this motherfucker up. And another orderly says, mm-hmm. So this episode is hilarious from the beginning. And, you know, I know why some people could get aggravated. It's a drama. It's sci-fi. Sometimes it's full-blown comedy, and then it goes back to trying to be serious. And I guess some people can't be jerked around like that and really go for the ride. But, I mean, I think it's beautiful. It's just so good. So we go back into the reflection. Snorri's handcuffed to the chair, and he's trying to reach a pen, and then he gets it, and he's about to kill himself. You have to die, Snorri. And then he hears gunshots. And in walks Annie. And she's real calm, and she sits down at the desk. I think she finds a cigar and lights it up. And she starts telling Snorri. She said, I'm going to blow my cover trying to help you. Apparently the CIA has ordered Annie to be Snorri's escort with the end of the world and all going on. Annie says, I have to get you to the intergalactic radio so that you can open up the portal so that your people can come in or whatever, something like that. Annie says, tell Snorri, you're not human. Your body is human, but your mind is alien. And that you are a secret agent, and you're actually here to stop Ernie and his people. So when he accidentally electrocuted little Ernie, he really did it on purpose. He just didn't know. He said, don't you think I would know if I was a secret agent? He says, she tells him you can't remember. And he says, and he says, well, who are you? And he says, I don't know who I am either. After the CIA tortured me and then trained me to be a killing machine. And Snorri says, so neither of us know who we truly are. We are the same. And he said, that's right. And he can't quite grasp it. So Annie says, I got to figure out how to do this. And then she says, tell me what the word Utengata means. And Snorri says, it means that something is amiss. And she says, no, what does it mean to you? And he says, to Snorri, it means that every relationship that I've ever had, past or present, has somehow been false. Because I am invisible. He's thinking about this and he says, and it makes me feel really sad at this time. She had shoved Kleenex up his nose. And after he said that, she said, your nose is bleeding. It's a good sign. But he's not quite awake yet. He still hasn't quite grasped it. He still thinks he's Snorri. So they exit the room, and there's this long one-shot tracking hall scene where Annie starts shooting all of these people that are popping up. And Snorri is really, he gets excited through the whole. This scene is beautiful because Emma Stone does such a great job. The director does such a great job. All the extras are in the right place. You know, it's a beautiful long tracking shot. It's well done. They only used a stunt double, I think, in one little spot. But she did most of it, and it was really good. But Jonah Hill is really good in the background as well. And I mean, every time he gets to his spot, he delivers his line. It's just a beautiful thing. These two comedic actors doing this long John Wick action sequence, you know. All of these people are showing up and she's shooting them. And Snorri says, you are very good with gun. And then Snorri ends up getting a gun. And at one point, they're shooting at him and he shoots and he kills 3 of them. 3 shots. Pow, pow, pow. I kill lots of people. Oh, they end up getting to an elevator. And it's so funny. And Snorri's like, You're a very exhilarating woman. I must visit your Texas sometime. Very fun. Oh my God, it was so funny. So she's trying to figure out which floor to go to, and it's negative something. And as the elevator's going down, wait, does she find a little thing yet? No, she doesn't. We go back to reality. Okay, they're in the elevator. We go back to reality. Dr. Zumi and the rest of the people there working, they realize that the computer's lying. They want to do a mercury test of the temperature in the room where the subjects are. It reads 99.1 on the computer. And when you do a real mercury test, they realize it's 140 degrees in there. So Dr. Zumi tries to leave the room, and the door's locked. And she realizes the computer has locked them in. Apparently, it looks like the computer is going to try to kill the subjects. So she starts telling the orderly in the other room, this gas starts coming out. Leisure time on the monitor turns into seizure time. And this smoke starts seeping in, the gas, and the orderly's, uh-oh, and he gets a gas mask, and Dr. Zumi from the other side starts to tell him what to do. You have to go to the mainframe, and the code to get in is 5678. And he does a couple of things, and then he has to pull this red lever to give Gertie a nap. And when he touches it, it electrocutes him. He hits the ground, and Dr. Vegeta says, oh, holy fucking shit. I mean, this is it, man. What are they going to do? I have no idea what they're going to do. And as soon as that happens, an alarm goes off. And Dr. James is in the other room with his mom. And he hears the alarm, and he says, code Epsilon. Oh, my God. So he has to get in the other room with Dr. Azumi to try to shut the computer down. Okay, we go back to the elevator, and there's Annie. She opens up a hatch, and left inside is this device that can track a tracking device inside of a body. She gets it. I guess it was left there for her. And she asks Snorri, have any Soviets had any access to your rectum? He says, my what? The elevator doors stop and open, and it's not the right floor. And what we're seeing is what the other subjects are experiencing. So the door opens, and Alice Beasley, who's playing one of the subjects, the only time we've ever really seen her, she's had a few one-liners, really funny. In her pod, she was reading Black Beauty, and she said, when is this fucking horse ever going to die? Which is just strange. Now, we realize all the subjects here have mental problems. But when this elevator door opens, Alice Beasley's hanging in this gold dress. She's kind of just hovering over the floor. And there's blood everywhere. It's running up and down the walls on one spot, and it's like a lake of blood. It's not unlike, the Shining elevator blood scene and stuff. It's just, that's what it's reminiscent of. And she's just floating there smiling. Elevator doors close, and it keeps going down. So she takes that device, and she said, you've got a recall trigger inside of you. And she starts putting it around him, and she says, it's in the knee. It's in the knee. And she's pulling it up. She's trying to pull it up. And finally, it comes out of Snorri's mouth. A little metal ball that hits the floor of the elevator. And then it pops into a popcorn. And Snorri says, popcorn problems. And then he looks at Annie and says, Annie, it's me, it's Owen. It's me. We're in a simulation right now. She's like, what happened to your accent? He said, oh my God. The elevator doors open up again, and it's number 5, and he's feeding a bunch of animals. And he's saying, you're my favorite? No, you're my favorite. You're my favorite. Oh my God. Elevator doors close again. Okay, so Owen's awake now. Annie, we're in a simulation. No, I'm here to save you. The computer's gone. The computer's effed up. And I'm here to wake you up, The elevator doors open again, and it's Grimson. And Annie knows Grimson right away. Apparently he's her contact. And he's like, good job at waking up Owen. I wish I could have been the one to give him a nosebleed. He's like, now, we just got to wake you up. he's cracking up. I mean, everything's shaking. It's this heat ray and everything's so hot. And he starts yelling, this whole fucking shit show. Come on, let's go. I don't know why she hasn't shown herself yet. Everything's all fucked up. And he's walking down the hall, leading them down the hall. And Owen says, how do you know him? And he said, that's my contact. So they go to a room that's labeled the McMurphys. And they walk in, and Grimson's explaining how the McMurphys are Gertie's entourage. These are the 4 people that are in comas. And you see the 2 little girls from all of the reflection laying in the beds, and there's a couple other people. There's always been 2 guys around or something with her too, driving the truck or whatever. So she's collected these 4 already. And Grimson says she was going to collect Annie next. And there's a bed there with Annie Landsberg written on the name tag. So when Annie sees this, she snaps out of it. And she says, I remember. And then Owen says, Annie, your nose is bleeding. Annie says, how can I find Gertie? Grimson said, the elevator should take you to her. And she looks at Owen and says, I'm sorry. And she puts her gun down and she walks out and gets in the elevator. And Owen says, she always leaves. And Grimson said, can't worry about that right now. We've got to go and save the world. If you don't do this, her brain's going to fry along with yours and everybody else. So in the reflection, it's the heat ray from the aliens, and the entire world's going to die. But in the simulation, he's got to save the subjects that are in that room that's 140 degrees. We go back to reality, into the lab. And for some reason, the door separating Dr. James Manoray and Dr. Fujita opens up, and he's able to go in there. And he's trying to find Azumi, and then he starts talking to her. He says, I'm blind. I was blinded by my mom's toxic love. And he wants to pull a switch and shut off everything. And if he does that, all of the data is going to be lost. The computer will be shut down, but not only the trial, and we don't know what's going to happen to the people in the trial if he does this, but all of the iterations that they've done, 70-something trials, all of it's going to be lost. Okay, we go back to the simulation. Owen, it's Owen now. I love Snorri. That was my favorite character that Jonah Hill did by far. Oh my God, that was funny. Grimson tells Owen, you're going to have to do it because I don't know how to work a Rubik's Cube. So they enter a room, and apparently it's the intergalactic radio. And Owen sits down at this Rubik's Cube that he has to do. And it's all one color, silver. But apparently, because he's so fixated with patterns, he'll be able to get it right. And every time a side is the same, it'll glow red. But other than that, you can't tell what color anything is. Owen's the only one that can do it. Now we go to Annie. Annie, when she got in the elevator and it started moving, she passed out. And when she wakes up, she's laying in the elevator, and there's Gertie holding her. Oh, and Gertie's taking Annie's hand and putting it on her face, and she's just amazed by human contact. And Gertie said, when Robert died, I felt the wind. It was cold, and it blew right through me. That was the first time I ever felt the wind before. You know what that is? You do know what that feels like? And Annie said, yeah. And Annie said, I changed my mind. I don't want to be here anymore. And Gertie said, but you promised. You said you'd stay with me. She said, I changed my mind. It was a bad deal. I always make bad deals. And you knew that, and you took advantage of that. That's what she told Gertie. And Gertie said, when am I ever going to stop feeling this way about Robert? And Annie said, never. You're just going to have to adjust around it. And Dr. Greta, Gertie freaks out and says, I've seen 800 and something minds, and I don't know how to figure it out. And Annie says, nobody does. And that's the moment where Annie explaining this to the computer is that when someone dies in your life, you just have to move on. And Annie explaining this to Gertie is the realization, that Annie's cured. She knows she has to move on. She said, nobody does. Now take me to my sister. And Gertie says, okay. We go back to Owen at the intergalactic radio. The intergalactic radio is actually a back door to the security system. If he can figure this Rubik's Cube out, then all the doors will open and they can save the people. So he's working on it real hard. And the whole time, Grimson's like at an old school telephone switchboard or something. All he's doing is pulling wires and plugging them back in. Okay, at this time, they start playing a song that is just absolutely gorgeous. The soundtrack was by Dan Romer, and if you ever want to listen to a beautiful song, pull up Dan Romer and listen to "This Is How We Say Goodbye," because this is Annie's moment, and it's just gorgeous. The music itself, and the way the scene is written it's kind of so plain and simple. And it reminds me of something like, if you're watching a show like This Is Us, which is like an emotional in-your-face every week, you'll probably see someone have this psychological realization every episode with the music pouring in, and it's just the way they get you, But this was one of those scenes. A lot of people have complained that it seemed like it was no big deal, but it was a big deal for Annie. Annie was lying to her sister with that damn camera, taking the picture of her armpit instead of taking a picture of themselves, and she wasn't saying the truth. She was being mean instead of saying, yeah, I don't want to say goodbye. I don't want you to move away. This is what's powerful to me, is that it was so simple. It's just one of those things. It was the moment right before her sister died. So Annie's apologizing. She tells Ellie she's sorry. She says she's sorry that I lost Groucho. I'm sorry that I was drunk at your funeral. And her sister asks, why wouldn't you take the picture? And she's like, I don't know. I don't know. No, you do know. Just say what you really feel. This is the part we can't get past. And she said, I didn't take the picture because I couldn't stand to think about being without you. I couldn't stand to think about you leaving. It was really awesome. And then she hugs her. And when she hugs her, she grabs her like she knows it's the last time. And at the same time that she knows that this is one of the only times she'll ever get to touch her again, and hugging her. And the whole time Gertie's watching in the elevator, and Gertie's learning. That's what's happening. So that was it. Ellie walks into the elevator with Gertie. And goodbye. And the elevator closes, and Annie's still sitting there. Now, this is the cliffside where Ellie died, but it's also that little miniature that's inside of the commons room. And this whole scene took place in the miniature. So when the elevator door closes and Annie's just standing there, she's actually in the miniature. So anyway, we get back to James Manoray. He's going to do it himself. So he finds his way blind to the lever. And Dr. Zumi's saying, you can't do this. It's your life's work. And Dr. Manoray says, Azumi, I have to kill my simulated mother. He pulls the lever. And nothing changes. I think when this alarm starts going off, that's when his blind as realizes that what he did didn't work. He says, "Oh, shit." And his mom says, "It's really hard to kill a mother's love." So we go back to Owen, and the music has swelled up at this point, and Owen does it. He finishes the Rubik's Cube. It glows red. And then back in the lab, the alarm stops. And the doors open. Azumi's like, Gertie's being compliant, and she looks at the monitor, and the monitor says, number 1, subject 1 saves the day. So then they immediately go to the mainframe of the computer, and James Manoray, he's still blind, gets the panel off. He starts yanking wire. She says we have to do it in a certain procession, and then she's holding his hand, directing him to where to go, and he's telling her which parts of the brain, the connection that needs to be pulled, and he starts pulling certain wires, and the computer says, "Please don't punish me because I'm sad." And then he pulls the last one that he needs to pull, and the whole thing shuts down. And that last little piece he had, he's looking at he gets his sight back. When he pulls one of the wires, he gets his sight back. But the last piece he had, he drops it, and I noticed Dr. Fujita immediately grabbed it. And then she started looking around at everything else. It was almost like part of her wants to continue this experiment somehow. But he got his sight back. We go back to Owen. The Rubik's Cube's done, but all of a sudden the room's completely dark. Grimson's not sitting there anymore. The door opens. He walks through the door, and he's in the lab, except no one's there. It's just like the lab version in the past vision. So when Annie was walking around, Owen walks out there, and he goes to the miniature, and he sees Annie. Owen sees Annie in the little miniature, and he says, "Hey." And she looks up and says, "Hey." He says, "How you doing?" She says, "Okay." He said, "Where's your sister?" And she said, "She's gone." And then we see the subjects waking up one by one. Owen wakes up. Annie wakes up. They're alive. They're waking up. And Owen immediately asks Annie, "Are you all right?" And Annie says, "Not now, Owen." And Owen has that look on his face. It's like, oh, you got to be gentle with Owen. You can't just say, "Not now, Owen." He gets dissed his whole life. He always will for the rest of his life. When you're paranoid schizophrenic, it's hard for somebody to stay with you, to help you, to go through that with you. So Annie's over her sister, and she's succeeded, it seems, but we're not sure how she's going to treat other people in real life. The odds wake up. That's how it ends. Just brilliant episode, so funny. And now we got the final episode, episode 10, option C. It's all real life now. Everyone's alive. Dr. Manoray says that. What? You're alive? And they're shaking their hands like they've just, come back from the space shuttle exploration or something. Even Dr. Greta's shaking their hands. "Congratulations. Oh, you look so good. Congratulations." Annie's still sitting in her seat. She doesn't even want to get up yet. And Dr. Manoray tells her, you've passed the 73rd iteration of the UPL. Congratulations, you're cured. And when Owen gets up to Dr. Greta Manoray, he shakes her hand and says, I have all of your books. I think you're wonderful. And she's like, oh, thank you. And Annie's still sitting there on that chair. She gets up eventually. Okay, so then the doctors all go to talk to Yoda. That's the television that's blurry. And Yoda tells them they're all incompetent. And Dr. Greta says, you can talk to them that way, but not me. I'm famous. And Yoda says that Dr. Morimoto's family's thinking about suing. And Dr. Greta says, I'm thinking about suing too. You use my mind, all for profit. And she said, like, it's disgusting. And Yoda says, I agree. So it kind of makes you think nobody's going to sue anybody. But the mom says, yeah, you know, make sure that my son never works in this field again. And Yoda says, you can be assured of that. Which I think is really weird. It's like, if Dr. James Manoray would have been successful, therapy would have been a thing of the past, and his mom would have been unemployed. But through his mom's therapy, you know, it didn't work, but she's the famous one, and he's the one that screwed up, and almost like, well, now he's going to be out of his job. And one last thing before they leave that scene, this Yoda TV says, your idiocy regarding the UPL may be of use to me in a private matter. Now, when he said that at first, what I thought was, privately, he's going to make fun of them. Your idiocy regarding the UPL. I've heard some people say that was kind of a hint at a sequel, that Yoda would want to continue this somehow in a private matter. But the fact that he said your idiocy regarding the UPL may be of use to me in a private matter, that makes me think that he's just going to joke around about it. Hold on. Okay, so we see all of the subjects leaving the pharmaceutical building. Everyone's getting handed their checks. The first one is Annie, and she tries to give the woman, it's the one she blackmailed, handing out the check. She tries to give the woman the check. I don't want it. I wasn't ever going to hurt your daughter. And she makes Annie keep the check, and she says, just remember your non-disclosure agreement, your NDA. And that's what she says to everyone. She hands the check to everyone and says, remember your NDA. And then Owen gets his too. Owen seeks out Annie right there. It's like she's smoking a cigarette, deciding where they're going to go, you know. And Owen tells Annie, I just wanted to tell you not to worry, that I'm not going to follow you around in this real world. It's kind of weird because it's almost like when Owen said it, because that's what he's used to. You know, he thinks she might be nervous about him wanting to cling on to her or whatever, and that don't worry, I'm going to leave you alone. I get weird sometimes, but I'm not going to do that to you. And in Annie's mind, she's thinking, Owen's my friend, and I didn't really expect him to do anything like that, but it kind of gives her the impression he doesn't really want to be around anybody anyway. So that's where they say goodbye. Owen gets in a cab, and that's it. Maybe. So then Dr. James and Dr. Azumi are in the elevator, and they're talking, and Dr. James tells Azumi that it might not have been his mother's toxic love that caused his blindness. It might have been when she kissed him. And then he tells her that when he was blind, he had a vision, a fantasy, that they were together on a journey, on a boat, heading for Atlantis. And Azumi says, I don't like boats. But they end up kissing, and it's a wild make-out scene that has some humor to it. Now, while they're in the elevator having this conversation, it opens up, and this guy comes in. And he's from some other trial that's going on in the building. And he's got this suit on, but it's all burned up, and his face is all burned up. And then when the elevator doors open, it says infirmary, and he walks out. He's heading to the infirmary, but while he was in the elevator, Dr. James is like, it's some great work they're doing up there. Oh, this show's so good. So they get to the parking garage, and Dr. James and Dr. Azumi walk out of the elevator, and she says, you need a ride anywhere? And he says, you drive? And she said, yeah, my therapist thought it would be a good idea. And there's two cars. There's one of them is the blue car from Furs by Sebastian that Bruce and Linda were driving. It's got the same license plate number and everything. And he walks up to that one, and she says, James, this one's mine. And you pan over, and it's the car with the flames on it from the gangland scenario that Owen was driving around. Now, some people say that this means that they haven't left the simulation, that they're still all in the simulation. And they could twist it that way if they'd like to. But my impression is that perhaps Dr. Azumi, when she was adding the final touches to the computer and putting Greta's mind in there, that she might have put some things of her own reflections in there. And her cars, that's her parking spot, and that blue car is always parked there or something like that. You know, you never know. I still think this is reality where we're at. But they get in the car with the flames on it. So then we go and we see Annie, and she gets to her apartment, you know, where she lives with those roommates of hers. And then we see Owen, and he gets to his sad little apartment. And the first thing Owen does is pull out a pad and a pencil, and he starts writing a letter to Olivia, telling her that he's sorry. So obviously Owen has learned something from this experience. Annie decides to go to her dad's house next. And yeah. At this point, there's two different things going on. Annie's going to be talking to her dad. Owen has the trial. So we see Owen sitting at the bench in front of the Statue of Extra Liberty. And this is the day. This is the court day. And his mom shows up. Owen's mom shows up. And Owen's mom, he says, I thought everybody was coming. She says, no, just me. You know, when Owen got to his apartment, the front of his apartment is where the miniature was that he fell into, and all the ads were there. And before it was Annie's face on the ads. Well, he looks at one of them before he walks into his building, and it's not Annie's face. It's another woman in the ad. So either the service is just using another face, or maybe he imagined the whole thing. You know, there's little things like that that make you ponder through the whole show. But anyway, he's at the bench, and his mom shows up, and the trial's about to start, and his mom says something really interesting. She wants to know if Owen has run into any strangers, people that he didn't know, that perhaps was trying to change his mind about what he was going to do when he testified. And he has this look like he's thinking. She said, because these women that go after the wealthy with these suits, they'll hire people. I think there's even a service for it. Now, this is an interesting point to me, because Owen, in his condition, he described how he liked Olivia, and then he got it in his head that she couldn't be trusted. Well, here's his mother feeding all of this conspiracy theory stuff to him. you know, if you met anybody lately and they've told you to testify differently, they're probably hired by somebody else. And what I got from that scene is his family has been doing this to him all along. He explained that it was Grimson, his vision, that told him not to trust Olivia, and then he had his blip. But it's obvious that his family's the one that pushes him into doing things and believing things. I thought that was a pretty good thing. So right before the trial, they're going over it with Owen one more time, what he's going to say. And the lawyer, their lawyer, who's pretending to be the cross-examiner, asks Owen if he ever saw his brother act in how did he say it? He brings up urination. Have you ever seen your brother urinate or be urinated on? Something like that. Owen says no. But that's when you kind of get the idea of what he's on trial for. Now, this is a civil trial. So I don't think that Jed's going to jail for what he did. I think that this woman's just suing. And Owen's father even says it. We're not going to let this woman get away with attacking my son after she agreed to do it. The phone rings in the office, and it's a settlement offer. And it's really generous. And Porter says, you know, my son might have some problems, talking about Jed, but I'm not going to let this woman destroy the family's name. So this is an admission of guilt by the father. He knows Jed did it. He's not going to take the settlement. He wants to win this thing in court. And it's all up to Owen. Everybody leaves the room except Jed and Owen, and Jed's sitting there and he starts crying because he's like, Adelaide's going to leave me. These are real tears, Owen. And Jed tells Owen, you're either part of this family or you're not. So then we get to the trial. And they're talking to Owen, cross-examining him. He's got a good story. Says his brother showed up at a certain time. Said, I know he was there 4 hours. That's how long it takes me to beat him at Risk or whatever they were playing. That's what he says. He's got the story, and he did what he was supposed to do, it seems like. But then the defense shows security camera footage from the Milgram Enterprises building. And there's an image of somebody grabbing a woman on the butt, and then there's an image of some guy yelling at a woman. Then he lays down a blanket, and then you see the woman kind of squat. And everyone in the courtroom does this. And then the guy's standing up in the security camera, and he's dripping wet. And you can tell it's Jed. You can look at the camera and tell it's Jed. And the woman says, okay, so the defense attorney says, so are we going to trust Owen's words? Or are we going to trust our own eyes? That, Owen, this is really up to you. Do you think that this looks like your brother? He says, it doesn't look like my brother. It is my brother. I'm sorry, I lied. I didn't mean to do it, but he's a monster. And that's him. Jed gets up, and I'm going to kill you myself. I said defense attorney, the plaintiff's attorney, the family's attorney's trying to get him to throw all this out of court, saying that we have a hostile witness and he needs to be detained, but the judge lets it all in. So Owen says he wanted to give his testimony, and he did. Owen grew a pair. So I guess that perpetual cowardice is out the window now. So then we see Annie, and she has her conversation with her dad. She gets to her dad's house, and she goes outside to the pod, and she says, Dad, we need to talk. This was okay for a while. Apparently, after the mom died, he was reclusive, but then when Ellie died, he just climbed in that pod and never got out. And Annie said, this is okay for a while, but this isn't good for me. This is not going to work for me anymore. Not anymore. I'm not going to stay here alone. And she says, I'm sorry that you married a sick woman. I'm sorry she left us. And I'm sorry that the wrong daughter died, the one that was easy. Instead, you're stuck with the one that's hard, the one that looks like the mom. So the one that reminds you of mom all the time. And then the window to the house opens up, and it's the dad. He's not in the pod, and it's Hank Azaria. His name's Hank. And he said, I take it the trip to Salt Lake City went good. That's not how I feel. You're not the wrong daughter. So she goes inside and she says, I never went to Salt Lake City, and she explains what she did. And all the way at the whole thing, the computer and everything else. And so they've had a long conversation, and the dad wants to know how the sister was doing. And Annie said, well, none of that was real. I mean, she was probably just a made-up version of Ellie. And her dad said, well, we really don't know how any of this stuff works. So how was she? And Annie said, well, Ellie was just like herself. And he says, well, have you learned anything in the last 3 days? And she said, I think so, but I think I might have done it wrong. Because Owen, she mentions Owen. Owen listened to all of my stories. But in the reflections, I kept giving him reasons not to trust me. But he just kept trying to help me. And her dad said, so he acted like a friend. And I think that's when Annie realized, yeah, maybe I need to be the stronger of the two in this situation and go help him. We're not really sure because they don't make it clear what she wants to do next. She's looking at a suitcase, and then she gets the nerve to grab it. But before we see where she's going, we see Owen. He's in a mental hospital, and it's not a state-run facility. So I'm assuming he's there voluntarily. The family might have you committed, and I think the Jed actually went through with mailing all of the menacing stuff to the government officials and stuff to try to get Owen to look crazy. But there is a point when it is specified this is not a state-run facility. Okay, so Owen's talking to the woman therapist that's there, and she says, you've talked to me about everything, but I need to know why haven't you talked to Annie again? And Owen said, well, because there's either two options. Option A, I'm going to look up her name and find out that she doesn't exist. And then I'm going to look up the pharmaceutical company, and I'm going to find out that that doesn't exist. And option B is even worse. We get to Annie, and she's standing there, and she's talking, and it's like she's talking to Owen. And she's saying, I should have told you that I cared. I was too caught up in my own stuff. But she's talking to a friend proxy, Owen. It's a friend proxy who's pretending to be Owen. And he's getting her name wrong, and he's getting everything wrong. He's not doing it right. But he is saying, I will go to Salt Lake City with you. So I'm assuming she's getting in her truck and going to Salt Lake City, and she'd like to do it with Owen, but she's bringing friend proxy Owen instead. And this doesn't work for me, okay? But anyway, I'm not quite sure. Because when she gets inside of her truck, some guy, I guess the truck was parked somewhere, and some guy drove the truck to her, And when he gets out, there's a newspaper in there. I'm assuming that guy had the newspaper. Maybe it was her dad's newspaper, but he would have had to have gotten in his truck in the last day or so. So I don't know. But anyway, she opens up the truck and the newspaper's there. And the cover of the newspaper has Owen's picture on it because the family's so rich. It says ashamed or something like that. And she starts freaking out. This is real Owen. This is real life Owen. Proxy friend Owen. Friend proxy Owen. And she says, this is a sign. Maybe the universe isn't chaos after all. She gets in the truck and she drives away. She leaves the friend proxy there. She's going to this facility where he's, I want to say he's admitted, not committed. But she shows up. She pretends that she's there to see somebody else. She signs the sign-in sheet. She says, my husband's already in there visiting our niece. She walks in. She goes to the yard where all the patients are kind of having a recess or something, and she finds Owen. She sits down next to Owen. She says, Owen, what are you doing? He said, I'm moving benches. He gets up and moves to another bench. And she follows him around. She says, look, why are you here? This isn't even a state-run facility. Why are you even here? He says, I'm sick. My mind doesn't work right. He says, I'm crazy. She says, you're not crazy. You're just a little crazy. People see ghosts. People hear voices. People see aliens. And then he says he's scared. And he describes option B. Option B is that you are real, but I end up getting fixated, and I end up getting angry, and then you stop calling me, and then my heart will be broken. He said it's easier if you're not real. And she says, well, I am real, and you know me, and I would never do that to you. And he says, okay. And she says, in 30 seconds, I want you to go in that bathroom. She goes in the bathroom. 30 seconds later, he shows back up. And it's so cool because he walks in the bathroom and she's in the stall. And she opens up the stall and she says, hey, come here. Oh, it's so good. I love this show. Owen goes in there and she's got clothes for him to put on. And she starts breaking down the scenario. Okay, I'm Linda. You're Bruce. We're here visiting our niece. It's been a great visit, but now we're leaving. And Owen starts to have this moment where he's thinking and the music is rumbling. And he says, Annie, what are you doing here? Why are you here? She said, because I'm your friend. And that's what friends do. And he says, okay. And he puts on the clothes, and they walk through the front, and the guy up there is like, hey, you came in here alone, didn't you? And she says, nah, you must be seeing things. They get outside, and they start walking really fast to the truck. And he's like, is this your dad's truck that you stole? No, he let me borrow it. She gets in the truck, and there's this little dog in the truck. She gets in the truck, and she's like, the door's open, come on. Owen gets in. She said, that's a Harpo. It's a rescue. The sister's dog was Groucho, and this one's Harpo. It's a rescue. And Owen immediately holds on to the dog, and she goes to start the truck, and she just stops for a second. And this is the moment when you can tell they both have mental issues that they have to get through, and they encourage each other to move forward. It's a beautiful thing. It's such a great connection. She stops. She says, this happens every time I try to start a car. Will you go to Salt Lake City with me? And Owen says, yeah, I'll go, but we have to go now. So she starts the truck. By this time, all the people in the office, the security guards from the clinic are coming out into the parking lot. And she gets the truck going, and he's like, watch out, watch out. And she's, oh, shoot, I missed the exit, so she has to make the loop. By this time, they're caught up to the truck, and one of them's right next to the truck trying to get in. And he's like, bye. They pull off onto the road. They're driving away. Both of them are smiling. And Owen says, "This is it. This is it." And they have this look on their face. And it holds, they don't say nothing. It holds on to them for an extended amount of time. Like 10, 15 seconds or something. And they don't say anything, but they're both smiling. It's not unlike The Graduate, where they're both there on the bus, but there's not these huge smiles on their face in The Graduate. When you watch The Graduate and it ends, it feels like they're uncertain what's going to happen now that they're together. A lot of similarities in this ending, but the fact that they were both smiling so much makes me think this is a different ending. They're going to be fine. Such a fucking good ending. Oh my God. And I don't care how predictable it was. I don't care that he described it and then it happened. That works for me. They start rolling the credits, and then you get one more last scene where the car with the flames is coming down the road, and you hear Dr. James and Dr. Izumi. Dr. James says, "Well, it's a ridiculous theory," but and Izumi says, "Well, it's a long way to Newfoundland." He goes, "You want it?" She says she wants to hear it, and he says, "Well, okay. Billions of years ago, there was an amoeba." So he starts describing what we heard at the beginning, his theory of how all souls need to be connected and that we don't process it in our minds and all that stuff. And as the car passes this way, here comes the truck going this way. And Owen says, "How far is it to Salt Lake City?" She says, "It's really far away, and I don't know if this truck's going to make it, but we'll get there eventually one day." And then Owen says, "Do we actually know each other?" And Annie says, "Well, we're off to a good start." And then the truck gets to where it's out of view. And then right before it ends, this little sanitation robot comes, and it's got a hawk perched on it. And running next to it is Groucho, the little dog that's been missing. And they're running to the end of the street too. And that's the end. And it's a beautiful thing. I absolutely love it. I get emotional talking about it. It's such a good thing. Love the way it ended. Could care less whether they have a sequel or not. I mean, I'm happy with it the way it is. But, if they want to dive back into this world or whatever, maybe have different characters or something, fine. If they want to follow Owen and Annie, I think that would be a totally different show, but that would be fine because I do love those characters. And so that's it. That's my breakdown of episode 9 and episode 10 of Maniac, my favorite show since Twin Peaks. I loved it. I may do another video after this talking about the whole thing and kind of what I gleaned off of it. But I think I covered everything really thoroughly in these last few videos. Check out my channel. Subscribe to Rosenfield 10. And you can watch all the breakdowns of all of these. If you go back far enough, you'll find some Twin Peaks reviews. And this has been Twin Perspective. I'm Joe. Thanks for watching. And I will see you in the trees. Bye.